the surah itself, it's very important always when studying the Quran to see the placement of the ayahs. The Quran is like a beautiful puzzle, which you really have to see how each piece is connected to the other piece to appreciate the grand image, you know. So when you look at the placement of the surah, it's between Surah Shams and Surah Duha. The previous surah is Surah Shams, which is the sun. Surah Al-Layl, which we're doing today, is the night. And the one after, Surah Al-Duha, is the daytime. Al-Duha is the daytime, in specific at around 9 a.m.-ish, when the sun is at its peak, daylight is at its peak. However, it's still a comforting form of daylight. And so some of the scholars now, they mention now why one surah we talk about the day, the next the night, and the next again the day. And so in that, if you look at, for example, the discussion that Allah Ta'ala speaks about in Surah Al-Shams, primarily He took several oaths, around 7 approximately, to then speak about the condition of the human self. And so a lot of the scholars, they say that this alludes to the fact that the human self, we as people, men, women, in our actions and behaviors and spirituality, are going through cycles of days and nights. We're changing always. And our iman is raising, sometimes it's lowering, sometimes the challenges become easier, the challenges become harder. Life is a roller coaster, ups and downs. And the world is of nights and days. And Allah Ta'ala speaks about this concept, that the day followed by the night followed by the day. And they're although both separate concepts, but they lead to each other and they're related to each other. And we'll speak about more of that when we break down the surah as well. This surah also, some of the scholars said that this is the surah for Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So they say Surah Duha is the surah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you ever look into the tafseer of that, you'll understand why. But this surah is the surah gifted to the friend of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Surah to Abi Bakr, the surah of Abu Bakr. And why is that? It's because a lot of the scholars are of the opinion, although I'll mention 2 opinions regarding that, but a dominant view is that this surah is speaking about the virtue of Abu Bakr, the type of person he was, his generosity. And we know many, many good things about Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, but the fact that a whole surah is speaking about him, it speaks high levels of his virtue and of his generosity, his fear of God, and other good qualities. So we can now move on, to the first ayah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والليل إذا يغشى. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says that by the night when it covers. So the part of the beauty of the Quran, is that, and a lot of times you'll see different approaches to try to understand the Quran. You'll see scientific approaches, you'll see mathematical approaches, you'll see informative approaches, you'll see linguistic approaches. And primarily, the language spoke great levels to the Arabs, because the Arabs were people of culture, and their culture revolved around their language and around specifically fluency and eloquence of language. If you were eloquent, you were honorable. If you were not eloquent, so much so that it's a known story about one of the poets, that he reached like the age of 7 or 8, and he had not yet said any poetry. So his father commanded his guards to take him to the jungle and to take his life. So then when they took him into the jungle, he started saying poetry, right? And so then they spared his life. My point of just mentioning this is that language is very important to the Arab. The Quran was primarily revealed to that society, and of course to all of mankind till the day of resurrection. But Allah Ta'ala describes the night using a verb, that the night, by the night, and he's taking an oath, and the oath is always to describe something great within his creation. This is something very great that I'm about to discuss, and also to bring your attention and my attention to something which he wants to discuss. When I take an oath, I yell and I take an oath, I swear by this. Everyone's then wondering for what, like, what is he swearing for, right? And hopefully those swears don't include any foul language, but A swear, generally, an oath, it's to bring attention, importance to something. So Allah Ta'ala takes an oath first, wal-layli, by the night, when it covers. Yaghsha, it's described as like a vessel. It covers, and that's really what the night is. The night, it covers us. It covers us from what? From the hustle and the bustle of the day. It covers us and gives us comfort, right? A covering is kind of a symbol of, when you want to protect someone, you'll cover them, you'll wrap them, you'll embrace them. So it's a sign of protection. It's a sign of comfort. So the night gives us comfort. It gives us, right, as Allah Ta'ala describes in the Quran, that the night was made as sukoon or sakan, as peace, so that you can find peace in the night, right? Now, just before we move on to the next ayah, there's one thing then we can learn about the purpose of the night. The night is to bring comfort in our lives, right? This is why the Messenger of Allah would tell us that we should rest, right? Even if, no matter how pious the person is, that person takes some hours of rest. Why? Because that's the purpose of the night. And so Allah Ta'ala is telling us the inner values, the inner intrinsic values of things. He's about to explain to us the night, the day, man and woman, right? But another thing which is very important to understand is that night is different from day. There's a diversity, and that diversity leads to these things serving different purposes, right? And so now we can move on to the next ayah. Allah Ta'ala says, وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, and by the day when it appears. Tajalla is when something manifests, right? Something great, magnificent, it shows, it appears. And so the night is, the day is not only, in this surah, it's being something as described as something as which appears, because that's what the light does, it appears. But then by virtue of that, it shows everything else. We wouldn't be able to see. That's what the dark is, right? We don't see anything. So the day, it shows everything to us. So it appears and it brings everything in its light into appearance, to show for us. And then we can now move on to the next ayah. وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنْثَى. And so the translation here, and I always, if whoever attends our tafseer on Saturday knows that I always discuss the translation. Why? Because the translation is also an effort done by a human being, right? Which ultimately describes and portrays their interpretation of the ayah, right? So over here we can see the translation is, and by he who created the male and the female. So over here then it would seem that Allah Ta'ala is taking an oath by himself. However, there's a few other interpretations as well. One, that this could also mean linguistically ma, and I won't go into the details of it, ma al-masdariya, and basically the crux of that, it would translate as, and the creation of man and woman, meaning the creation of man and woman is magnificent. Look at this, the creation, and marvel at its magnificence. Very interestingly, there's certain realities that unveil to us then. There are certain realities that open to us about man and woman, that they are like the day and night. They're very different. The day and night serve completely different purposes. The same way, the man and the woman serve different purposes, and they act in different ways. This can become a very sensitive topic, but Allah Ta'ala in the Quran very clearly says it. وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, and the male is not like the female. They are different. They are different, but they are also similar. How so? The night eventually turns into the day. Right? So there's like a meeting point as well, though, right? Because it eventually turns into the day eventually turns into the night. So there are points where they meet. So there are similarities as well. But then why is Allah Ta'ala taking oaths by all of these things? That will open to us in the next ayah. But also we can understand a few things before we go to the next ayah, which is Allah Ta'ala is taking an oath by these diversities, right? And this is a concept which the scholars talk about, which is that the diversity of the world, the multiplicity of the world, but the unity of God, right? The oneness of God, right? So you can find the diversity in all of these things, which is supposed to point us to that one creator who is ever able and capable, and his creativity is magnificent. So it points us to him, all this diversity. And diversity is beautiful. If we didn't have diversity, there would be no beauty. Diversity is what makes the world beautiful. So you have this diversity, but it points you to the oneness of the creator. So the creation has multiplicity, is diverse, but the creator is one, right? And then we can learn that these are the oaths, right? Now the oath obviously doesn't stand alone, right? If I say, I swear by a book, okay, you'll be waiting that, oh, what is he going to say? Okay, say something. What if I just stop there? Obviously, I'm not going to stop there. The oath is to reinforce a statement. And that statement is the next ayah. So now if we move on to the next ayah, Allah Ta'ala then tells us why he's taking an oath, and then it'll become more clear to us why he's taking an oath by different things. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. Indeed, your efforts are diverse. This is very important. Why? Because when you see mankind striving and struggling to all kinds of things, and this ayah is not, it's directly speaking to everyone, right? Muslim, non-Muslim, white, black, doesn't matter. But like the kind of the what's important to a person is diverse. Everyone finds something uniquely important and significant, and then those people that work towards those objectives or those aims or those goals in various different ways. So you'll see this diversity, and you'll end up getting lost if you don't know the right path, right? And so that's why we need the guidance, and these subjects will come in the coming ayat. But you'll see all of these different efforts and all of these, because innal insana lafi kabad, that man is always the human being is always in a struggle, always striving, right, towards something, and towards various paths. But then which one is going to lead? Because they're all diverse, but they're going to lead to one, which is Allah, right? So what is that path which will then lead to Allah? And so in that, then Allah Ta'ala describes to us in the coming ayat. So in the next ayah, we can move on. Allah Ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى. Now Allah is describing one path. As for the one who gives and fears Allah. So this ayah seems to be speaking very general. And there's a concept in the Quran that the Quran speaks very general, so that it is a message to everyone, but at the same time, it can be speaking about specific people. So Allah Ta'ala says that as for the one who gives, and over here, he's not mentioning what's being given, nor the person who it is being given to. Why? Because this is the etiquette of the giver in Islam, that a Muslim gives without discrimination. They give, and they give without discrimination to how much they're giving or to who they're giving. They just give. That's the beauty and the generosity of a strong Muslim. So I said in the beginning, though, that this is the Surah Abu Bakr, but I said also that there's another interpretation, because there's another narration, and it's a beautiful narration. It's regarding a Sahabi by the name Abu Dahdah radiallahu anhu, that there was a person with a garden, and his garden had date trees, full of date trees, and there were parts of those date trees which were inclining over the fence, and some of the dates would fall over the fence. Now, on the other side of the fence, there was a very poor family, right? And this story is very beautiful. It was a very poor family, and they had children. Those children, when they would see the dates fall, they would go and they would grab those dates, and they'd try to, keep them and eat them. But the owner of that garden, he'd rush over and he'd grab the dates from the hands of those children, and those children would then cry. And the parents would be in utter shock that, they're just kids, how could a person be like this to just kids? They don't know better, and they're hungry. They're from they're in a poor family. They see dates, and now he's not only are they getting the dates, but then after that, he's depriving them, he's taking it from their hands, right? So then the Prophet ﷺ, the parents of those children went and they complained to the Prophet ﷺ that, this is what this person is doing. So the Prophet ﷺ said, let me talk to the owner of the garden. He goes to the owner of the garden. He says, I'll promise you a date tree in paradise if you just let these kids, have their dates, whatever it falls on. So he says, no. Now, here's the thing. What is he declining? We think it's just a tree in paradise. Obviously, if you have a tree in paradise, you're going to be in paradise. You're not going to have a house in paradise or a tree in paradise and you're in, may Allah protect, hellfire. So if he's promising you a tree in paradise, by virtue of that promise, you're also being promised a space and a place in paradise. So he said no to that and declined it. A Sahabi by the name of Abu Dahdah found out about this. And so then what did he do? He went to the Prophet ﷺ. Actually, no, he went to the owner of the garden and he said, let me buy this whole garden. He bought the whole garden from him, gave him a generous amount. Then he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, I will give you this whole garden if you just give me a tree in Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ said to him, he said, okay, and he promised. Abu Dahdah turned away and he went and he told his wife of this deal. And so then he went home screaming, Rabih al-bay'a, Rabih al-bay'a, that what a bargain, what a profitable bargain. And so he went to his wife. His wife said, what a profitable bargain, what a great decision you made. And so then the Prophet ﷺ took that garden of dates. He promised Abu Dahdah a date tree in paradise. And then he gave that garden to the poor family on the other side of the fence. So some of the scholars say that Allah Ta'ala is speaking about this person. The other person who majority of the Mufassirun, the majority of scholars say that this is referring to, this ayah, is Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu. And you can speak about the generality of this, which is that Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu was always a very generous person. And he would always free slaves, give to the poor. And so much so that the higher people of the Quraysh and Makkah, they would make fun of him, that what are you doing? You're literally just giving your wealth to waste. So it was a way of the Arabs that they would free slaves when they were young sometimes. The reason being, if you freed a slave, then that slave owed you a favor. So if you free a young slave, then that person who's young and still strong, there's a lot more you can get out of them than freeing an old woman or an old man. But Abu Bakr, he would free old men, he would free people who were ill and had physical ailments, handicapped. He would free old women, and they would say that what are you doing? You're wasting your favors because you're not going to get anything out of these people. But another person who he freed was who? It was Bilal radiallahu anhu. He freed Bilal radiallahu anhu, and this was a known thing. He bought him from Abu Sufyan, and then he freed him because of the torment that was being given to Bilal radiallahu anhu for accepting Islam. So he bought him just so that he could free him from that torment and that torture. But Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was also a very generous person. And so Allah Ta'ala then honors him by describing him here, A'ta. But we can also now, let's pay attention to the ayah a bit more, because we spoke about some of the backgrounds of this ayah. A'ta is something which is done for creation. The next word, wattaqa, this is related to God. And so there are a few things over here that Allah Ta'ala is telling us that if you want to be of the people that go to Jannah and you want to be of the people of the right path, there are a few things you have to do. One of them is that you have to be good to mankind. You have to be good to humanity. Okay? So get your things straight with mankind. And then also you can't just be good to people. You need to be good with God too. If at any range you are falling short in any of these areas, then you're not completing the quota. You're not completing the requirement. So a'ta wa taqa, you have to give to people, and then you have to sacrifice for God, and you have to fear Allah. And then in the next ayah, Allah Ta'ala says, وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى, and believes in the best. Now in the brackets you can see here reward, because that's also one interpretation. But saddaqa, first of all, is a person who firmly believes in something. Not only believes in it, but tells others, this is the truth. This is the truth. بالحسنى. Uh, he believes husna. Now, what is husna? We'll go through four interpretations. The first one, reward. Okay, so the promise, the reward is Jannah, right? So the person believes that, no matter what good he does, that he will be given his due. He will be given a reward by Allah. Second interpretation, that whenever he gives generously, that he knows that Allah Ta'ala will return to him. And right, this is a part of our belief. And I said that, it's good that we're talking about this before Ramadan. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ spoke seriously about generosity before and during the month of Ramadan. And this Aisha radhiyallahu anha said that the Prophet ﷺ was the most generous he was in the month of Ramadan. He was more generous than the wind. He was more generous than the wind. Excuse me. So the Ramadan is the month of generosity, and we'll get to that again towards the end. But these people believe that whatever they give for the sake of Allah, they will be recompensed. There is a return. Okay. The third meaning is a bit more complicated. This person believes in every good thing. So some of the scholars said that husna refers to a good statement. And what's the best statement? It is La ilaha illallah. So whatever Iman and Islam brings to the table, the Sharia, that person believes in all of it and practices it. Right? He makes it a part of his life. Right? So every good morality which Islam establishes, he believes in it. He makes it a part of his life, and his vision of life and his world vision, because we all carry a vision on how we view the world. But his worldly vision becomes an Islamic vision. You see through the lens of Islam. This is the point. You see through an Islamic lens. This is how you judge through things. This is how you make decisions. That your decisions are based off of Islamic values, Islamic morale. So we can move on to the next ayah. Then he says, this person who does all of these things, فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى, we will ease him towards ease. So what does that mean? فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. Taysir means to make something easy, to make the pathway easy. It also means when the camel gives milk easily, right? So فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى, we will give ease. Okay. Some of the scholars say we will ease him towards ease. We will ease him towards yusra. That yusra means Jannah. Some of the scholars said that it's not limited to Jannah. Rather, it means we will give him all ease in this dunya and in the hereafter. And what does that mean now? It's a very important concept that we need to understand, that ease doesn't necessarily mean an easy situation. But ease means, it could also mean that the burden will be very difficult, but God will give you the ability, Allah will give you the ability to bear that burden. He will make the burden easy. The life of Rasulullah ﷺ was very difficult. Outwardly, it seemed very difficult, but he was able to bear that burden. Why was he able to do it? Because Allah gave him the ability. Now in this, I won't go into it in detail, but there is a discussion that some of the scholars will discuss, which is regarding Allah Ta'ala's decree, so divine decree and fate, and human volition, so human action, right? If Allah decides everything and he makes things easy or not easy and difficult, then what's the point of us doing anything, right? And the Sahaba even asked this question. But what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, no, you do your due diligence, what's upon you, your obligation, and Allah then will do the rest, right? But by nature, when a person is doing something, his actions will go towards a direction. His temperament and his nature and his values and his behavior will push him towards a direction, and Allah will open that direction to him. If it's good, then it's good, right? So Allah will ease him towards good things, right? Allah will make life easy for him. Difficulty is easy for him. Now we can move on to the next ayah. Now, over here now, there's the complete opposite is being described. Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى, but as for the one who withholds, stingy. So bakhila is the complete opposite of a'ta, the one who gives. And wastaghna considers himself free of need, right? So ittaqa, the person who fears Allah, it's because he knows he's needy of Allah. But the person who considers himself free, and whether they, believe in Allah by their mind or their tongue, but their action, they're acting like they don't, because they don't keep Allah in mind whenever they do anything. They don't think of Allah before they make a decision. They think that their decisions revolve around themselves and no one but themselves, not around Allah and what Allah wants and what pleases Allah. That person's acting arrogant. Right? So, wastaghna, he finds himself free of need. That وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى. And the next thing, right? The next thing is وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى. The next ayah, وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى, that this person denies the husna. So everything we mentioned before of husna being either Jannah or promise or return of Allah's favors or morality, Islam, La ilaha illallah, the person denies this, then فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. Then we will, the next ayah, Allah Ta'ala says that we will ease him towards difficulty. We will ease him towards difficulty. Now, how do we realistically understand this though? Because there are a lot of disbelievers that are living easy lives. And so that's why it's very important to understand that ease and difficulty is not necessarily what our eyes only see, but it's what's behind the scenes as well. This person who's a disbeliever may be living a very easy life, a lavish life, a luxurious life, and may die in the hospital, and their death even may seem easy. It seems like they're not even seeing any difficulty. They died in their sleep or something, a very easy death. Does that mean they're not going to see difficulty? No, because ease and difficulty is firstly the way where Allah places it and how He judges it to be. This is why when a Muslim is going through ease or difficulty, no matter what, they are positive with Allah. Their thoughts are positive about Allah, right? And so, فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى, we will make their path towards heaven more difficult. We will make their path towards doing good deeds more difficult. It will be harder for them to ever be honest. It will be harder for them to be generous. Right? We'll make the stingy person more stingy and make it difficult for them to give. Right? This is the meaning of فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى, that their habits will become hurdles for them, burdens for them. Their ways will become solidified, stronger and stronger in the ways of evil, in the ways of falsehood. وَمَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُ مَالُهُ إِذَا تَرَدَّى. Now moving on to the next ayah. And وَمَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُ مَالُهُ إِذَا تَرَدَّى. And what will his wealth avail him when he falls? Meaning, when this person dies, what will this person's wealth give them? Their wealth will grant them nothing. It won't give them anything. That wealth which they were holding on to very strongly, it's not going to do anything for them when they die. It won't go to the grave with them. It'll stay in this life. It'll be divided amongst those people who live after him or her. That wealth won't benefit him. It won't protect him or her from death, nor will it protect them in the grave. وَمَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُ مَالُهُ إِذَا تَرَدَّى. Their wealth will not grant them any independence. It will not grant them anything else. But rather, it's what they do with that wealth. That's what matters. And now in the next ayah, the subject starts to change a bit. Allah Ta'ala says, Inna alayna lal-huda. That indeed upon us is guidance. Meaning the guidance will only come from us. Right? So if we want guidance, and if we want other people to have guidance, it has to come from Allah. Right? So that guidance comes from Allah. Allah is the one who guides. Allah is the one who guides. So Inna alayna lal-huda. Guidance is in our hands. And earlier in the surah, Allah Ta'ala talked about all of these different pathways, and that you will become lost in these pathways because there's so many pathways and it gets confusing. If you want to know what's the right way, then remember that you need to seek it from Allah. You need to seek it from God. Now, here's the thing though. We start to think that guidance is very robotic. And that, again, why should we make effort if guidance is in Allah's hands? And if He wants to misguide me, He can misguide me. Well, here's the thing. Guidance can be of different types. One is that a person grabs a child by their finger and guides them to a house. One is that I inform that child that go straight, take a left, then go straight, then take a right, and you'll see the house there. Now, if that child or that person decides not to follow the pathway I told him because he sees a alleyway, some alley, which seems like a shortcut, or he gets distracted by something, she gets distracted by something on the way, that's not the informer's fault, that's the person's fault. So Allah has guided us and he gave us the guidance, and he gave us the access to the guidance, which is access to the, revelation, the book, the Quran. But if we then choose not to live by it, or if we then choose not to hold on to it and not to think about it and learn it, then who's that on? That's not on Allah. That's on my freedom of choice. That's on me, the choice that I made. And life is all about choices. We will make choices, and diverse choices. So it's about making the right choice. وَإِنَّ لَنَا لَلْآخِرَةَ وَالْأُولَى. And indeed to us belongs the hereafter and the first life. In this ayah, Allah is trying to tell us that, a lot of times in our efforts, right, we become lost. What should I do? Should I become a doctor? Should I become an engineer? And in that, then, will I have time to learn my deen? Should I give my time to this business, or should I give my time to the masjid? What should I do? So Allah Ta'ala is trying to guarantee us that just remember that, just as you work for the hereafter and you remember that Allah will return to us and reward us in the hereafter, don't be afraid to give wealth for the sake of Allah, to give generously. Don't be afraid to give your time for the deen. Why? Because Allah owns this dunya as well. Just as he owns this dunya, he owns the hereafter. Just as he owns the hereafter, he owns this dunya. And everything which you will get and you will receive, it will be given by him. So why are you fearing then? Why are you fearing doing the right decision, making the right choice, and giving your wealth in the path of Allah, doing things for the sake of Allah, taking out time for worshipping Allah, fearing Allah, and then taking care of the rights of people? If you know that Allah is the one who is the owner of both of these realms and universes. So أَنذَرْتُكُمْ نَارًا تَلَظَّى. So I have warned you of a fire which is blazing. And so some of the scholars say this is speaking about a specific place in the fire. And some of the scholars say that no, this is just in general. Taladha is the hottest temperature that fire can be at. So Allah is talking about the hottest place of Jahannam. فَأَنذَرْتُكُمْ نَارًا تَلَظَّى لَا يَصْلَاهَا إِلَّا الْأَشْقَى. Moving on to the next ayah, Allah says that none will enter that burning place therein except the most wretched one. Now this ayah requires some attention, so please pay attention to the structure of this ayah. Allah says that he's not saying that the most wretched person will enter the fire. He's saying no one will enter it but the most wretched. What does that mean? Let's just say, for example, I say that no one will receive a ticket except the person who runs a red light. Okay, so no one will receive a ticket on this road except the one who runs a red light. What do you understand from that? That if I don't run a red light, then I won't be getting a ticket. So on this road, if I run a stop sign, I should be fine, because the governor or whatever, the law is saying that if you don't run a red light, meaning you have to run a red light in order to get a ticket, but obviously we know that there are other ways to get tickets as well. But if I said to you, if you run a red light, you'll get a ticket, then I'm not exclusively saying that's the only way to get a ticket. I'm saying that's a way to get a ticket, and there are other ways as well. But when I say only a person who will run a red light on this road will get a ticket, that means exclusively only that person committing that crime will get a ticket. So although this ayah is very scary, it's also merciful as well. Why? Because he's telling us that you have to be the most wretched of the wretched to enter this place of fire. And so if you're not the most wretched, you will not enter this place of fire. So just as he's warning us, Allah Ta'ala, in this ayah, he's showing us his mercy as well. And that's just a profound and beautiful lesson which we learn from this ayah. الَّذِي كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. What's the description of this person who is the most wretched? The one who denies and turns away actively from the truth. And so we learn, There's a difference from the disbelievers at the time of Makkah and the disbelievers today, that the disbelievers of Makkah had access to the living being of the Prophet ﷺ, the living person. They had access to the Quran being revealed right there and then, but they, 100% by their own logic and their choice, chose to deny and turn away. Watawalla, right? And although in our day a disbeliever would fall under the same category, but the rank would be different. The rank would not be as severe. وَسَيُجَنَّبُهَا الْأَتْقَى. But the most righteous will avoid it. Actually, the translation isn't the most correct. Underneath, actually, it's better. The righteous, but will be removed from it. The righteous, meaning the righteous will be put aside from it. They will be protected from it. But over here as well, the most righteous, al-atqa, the most righteous. Now, again, this is different though, because in the last ayah it was no one shall enter it except for the most wretched. Over here, the most righteous will be protected from this fire. But what does that mean? The most righteous will be protected, but that's not necessarily that only the most righteous will be protected from it. So people like me or you, who we would consider ourselves, not only out of humility, but in reality that we know we're not the most righteous people. We're not the best of the people. We're not Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. That maybe there's a chance that we'll be protected from it as well. Because Allah did not say only the righteous. He said the most righteous, but others as well. But what's the example of that righteous? الَّذِي يُؤْتِي مَالَهُ يَتَزَكَّى. The one who gives his wealth to purify. So some of the scholars say this can be understood. Gives his wealth to purify himself, and some say to purify his wealth, right? And it works for both. When you give your wealth, you're ultimately purifying your wealth and you're purifying yourself. You're purifying your wealth from being spent in wrong places, extravagance, being spent on haram, and you're purifying it from being spent in the right place. And then you're also purifying yourself from being greedy. You're purifying yourself from being stingy. You're purifying yourself from being selfish, right? وَمَا لِأَحَدٍ عِنْدَهُ مِنْ نِعْمَةٍ تُجْزَى. And that when this person gives, that the giving that they do is not for anyone, right? And not giving for anyone who has done him a favor to be rewarded. That you're not giving it for any purpose, meaning any agenda. I'm not giving it so that people call me generous. I'm not giving it so that people also give me back. I'm not giving it so that when I give this person, he'll owe me a favor. I don't smile at other people just so they can smile back. I smile regardless, whether they'll smile back or not. I will give regardless of whether people give me back or not. I'm not expecting a favor. This person gives and he doesn't expect a favor from anyone else. He doesn't expect a repayment from anyone else. إِلَّا ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ رَبِّهِ الْأَعْلَى. The next ayah. إِلَّا ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ رَبِّهِ الْأَعْلَى. But only seeking the face of his Lord Most High. And what this means, what does it mean by the face? Number one, the pleasure. So where do you obviously see the pleasure of a being? Its face, right? So seeking the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala. And also, a few more things we can understand from this. It's that, when you do something good and you please a person, you can see the trace of pleasure on their face. And so you look at them and you're happy to look at them. So you're seeking that pleasure, that expression, when a child does something good and their parents, they applaud them and they're happy with them, they smile to them. They really love that moment. They experience that moment. They love that moment. But then when a child does something which they disobey the parent, then they look down. So the people who please Allah, they will be looking at Allah in paradise and they will see Him. Allah Ta'ala says it in the Quran, that their faces will be shining and they will be staring at Allah's beauty. They will be staring at Allah. But as for the people who don't do good, they are stingy, they hold their wealth back, and they limit themselves to the dunya. Those people will be veiled from Allah and they will be in disappointment. Allah will be disappointed in them and they will be disappointed and they will put their head down. They won't want to see the face of Allah because of disappointment. They know they will be ashamed. وَلَسَوْفَ يَرْضَى. And in the last ayah we conclude, That وَلَسَوْفَ يَرْضَى. And this person, man or woman, male or female, who does these good actions, they will soon be satisfied. Soon and surely they will be satisfied. They will be pleased. Please Allah, and you will be pleased one day. And so what are we learning? We said it was about Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu. What did he do? He freed a slave. He freed a slave, but he freed it in a way that he's also understanding, I'm a slave. Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu freed Bilal, seeking that he is also a slave, that, oh Allah, I freed this slave. Now I'm your slave, you free me from the fire. You understand? So this is the beauty behind Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's actions, and why it's a general example for all of us that we need to be generous. And this is the perfect time coming that we prepare for this. We take an example. Ramadan is about taqwa. Ramadan is about generosity. Ramadan is about calling towards good, forbidding from evil, about upholding morality, about becoming better people, being more honest people, upright people. And so this, when we go through these cycles of day and night, the surah was Surah Al-Layl, we will see nights. We will see nights. Life will be difficult. Sometimes we'll experience spiritual highs, and sometimes we'll experience spiritual lows. Sometimes we want to fast, sometimes we don't want to, it becomes difficult. Sometimes we want to pray, sometimes it's difficult. Taraweeh is difficult. Qiyamul Layl, praying in the night, is difficult. But we need to try. We need to keep trying. And for those people who try, then there's a great promise for them. Allah Ta'ala promises them, and all those promises we spoke about within the surah. And I'll conclude with this. We ask Allah Ta'ala that He accepts our efforts in attempting to understand the surah, forgive us for any shortcomings in trying to understand it, and that He is the best knower of His word, and that He grant us deeper understanding of His Quran. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum.